Alright guys, man, you don't know how many times I've recorded this. I'm so tired. Okay, today we're going to be solving absolute value equations. These are the steps that we're going to use. Step 1, isolate the absolute value. Pretty much whatever's in front and in the back, make sure there's nothing until it's only whatever's inside the absolute value. Step 2, we're going to set two equations, one equal to a positive answer and one equal to a negative answer. And then step 3 is just solve both equations. Alright, so here to start off, we're going to have the absolute value of 2 is 2. The absolute value of negative 2 is also a positive 2 because it's the distance from 0. So our answer choices, our problems look like this, where we're solving for an unknown variable. Well, it represents a number, but we don't know what that number is. But we know that if it's set equal to 2, that x could be a positive 2 or it could be a negative 2 because both of those give me a positive 2 as an answer. So then my answer here is x equals the 2 or negative 2. Right? So those are my possible answers. Alright, so these are the steps and we're going to practice them. In example 1, we can actually skip step 1 because there's nothing in front of the absolute value and there's nothing behind it, so it is already isolated. Then I can go to step 2 where it says split into two equations. One is going to be set equal to a positive answer. Well, our answer is 15. That's already positive, so leave it. But the other one is going to be set equal to a negative 15, and then we solve. Okay. Once you split them, you don't need the absolute value sign. So I need to get rid of the 5 times the x. So we divide. So that's going to be x equals 3. And if I divide on one side, I divide on the other. And this is the same steps on the right side. Divide by 5, but over here we end up with a negative 3. Alright guys, it's not always going to be the same number and then just one's the opposite sign. It turned out to be like that in this example, but not always. Alright, in example 2, we have a plus 2 outside, so that one we have to get rid of it first. So we actually have to do step 1 over here where it said isolate the absolute value. So we're going to subtract a 2, subtract a 2. The absolute value of x equals 5. Well, there's nothing inside besides the x, so 1 will be set equal to 5, and 1 will be set equal to a negative 5, and there is our answer, because x is already isolated, so there's not much to solve there. And if you want to, you can always plug it back in place of x, back here in the equation. If I put 5, the absolute value is 5 plus 2, does it give me a 7? Yes. And then I plug in a negative 5, the absolute value of negative 5 is still positive 5, and I add a 2 would be 7. Alright, example 3. There's nothing in front, there's nothing behind, so isolated already, meaning I can split it into the two equations. X plus 2 equals a positive 7, x plus 2 equals a negative 7. Get rid of that plus 2, so x can be by itself. Minus 2, x equals 5. Same thing over here, subtract a 2. If I do that to one side, I subtract a 2 on the other. Sorry. I forgot to put the negative on the second one. Remember, one has to be set equal to a positive answer, and one has to be set equal to a negative answer, and then we can solve. So that gives me a negative 9. Why? Because a negative plus a minus a number, they have the same sign, so we add them and keep the sign. Alright, next part. Again, we can skip into step 1 and go straight to step 2 because there's nothing in back or in front of the absolute value signs. So we're going to split it into the positive 28, and then same equation, but now set it equal to a negative 28. Right? Because we always have two possible answers when we have absolute value, right? So then we have to start solving. Get rid of 4 by subtracting a 4 minus 4. So that's 8x equals 24. Then divide by 8. And I'm just solving right here. If you're not sure why I'm doing like these certain steps, these are all steps that we were supposed to learn in algebra 1. So if you need help solving, please come to tutoring or ask in class and I will be glad to help you. Alright, next equation, same thing, subtract the 4, subtract the 4. So that gives me 8x equals, be careful, these are negatives, so same sign, we have it, we'll keep the sign. Divide by 8, divide by 8, x equals negative 4. Okay, so there are two answers and you can always plug them back in place of x over here and try them out. So real quick, in my head I'm just doing this. We put 8 times 3 is 24 plus 4 is 28, and that makes sense. And then we put a negative 4. 8 times negative 4 would be negative 32 plus 4 would be negative 28, and then the absolute value of negative 28 is 28. Okay, so I just did it in my head real quick, but you can always write it out. Alright, since there is a negative 6 in front of the absolute value signs, it is touching it, so that's multiplication. So to get rid of it, we have to divide. And I need to do that first because the absolute value sign must be isolated. So I divide and I divide. So that's going to be 2n plus 2 equals, and that gives me a positive 8. And then I split it to be equal to a negative 8 also. Remember, I have to have a positive answer and a negative and then start solving. Alright, so we're going to subtract this 2 first, subtract the 2, write it to one side, I have to do it to the other. So that's 2n equals, and that's 6. And then the 2 is being multiplied with the n, so get rid of it by dividing. So then my answer is n equals 3. Other side, same thing, subtract the 2, subtract the 2, but my answer will be different because that's a negative 8. Negative 8 minus 2 is negative 10. And then divide by 2, divide by 2, and equals negative 5. Guys, if you catch a mistake and you let me know, I will give you extra credit. Just so FYI. Alright, example 6, we have nothing in front and nothing in the back of the absolute value. So I can already split it into 2. X over 4 equals positive 2. X over 4, which is divided by 4, equals negative 2. And then the opposite of dividing is multiplying, so we multiply, which will cancel that out. But if I multiply on one side, we multiply on the other, and that's x equals, well, 8, right? Alright, then same thing on this side, we multiply by 4, we cancel out this 4, but if I multiply on one side, we multiply on the other, so that's x equals negative 8. Okay? There are two answers. Next example. Alright, nothing in front of the absolute value, nothing behind it, so I can split it into a positive answer, which is the 6, and then into a negative answer, which is negative 6. Alright, so we don't want x in our denominator ever, so let's get rid of it. Okay guys, there's a long way. I'm just going to show you the short way because I assume you already learned all the steps you should have done in Algebra 1. It's a shortcut to switch the denominator with what's on the other side of the equals. Okay, so this is a special one. Oh my gosh, if I explain you, I can explain this in class, okay? So once you finish watching the video, I can go over this one and show you the long way. This is just a shortcut. Switch the denominator with what's equal to on the other side, and then we can start solving. So plus 3 and plus 3. Now if I want to add these by hand, then I'm going to have to simplify this fraction into 2/3. That way I'm dealing with smaller numbers. And then that 3 plus the 2/3, I don't want mixed numbers, so let's change that 3 to 9 divided by 3, which will still give me 3. And then that way I still have the same denominator, and then I can add them, which is 11, and then you keep the denominator, and that's what x equals. Okay, so same thing on this right side. Let's switch the denominator with what's equal to, so that's going to be 4 over negative 6 equals x minus 3. It's already simplified the 4 over 6 by changing that to 2/3, negative 2/3. And then let's get rid of the 3 by adding a 3. Adding a 3. Alright, so I have, let's change that to 9/3 again, minus 2/3, or if you want to put it as a plus negative 2/3, it's the same thing. And then that's going to be, since it's negative, we subtract and keep the sign of the larger one, and that's our answer. Alright, so fractions, I know most kids don't like fractions, but that was a lot of fractions that you need to remember, a lot of properties of fractions, how to add and stuff. Alright, our last example here, we need to get rid of this plus 4 and this times 6. Let's get rid of that 4 first. Subtract the 4. Remember, we always want to get the absolute value sign isolated before we start solving, or before we split them into 2. So that's negative 18. Bring down the negative x plus 1 inside, and then the 6. Now let's get rid of the 6. We're dividing by 6, divide by 6. So I'm left with the absolute value of negative x plus 1 equals negative 3. Now, check this out. Inside here, I don't know what that answer is, but I know that whatever it is, I'm getting the absolute value of it. What we said at the beginning, the absolute value should always be equal to positive. And here, it's not. You see that? My answer could be negative, yes, inside the absolute value signs, but not outside. So here, if you're left with absolute value signs, and whatever's in here, not that important, well, it is important, but if whatever you have here, you look on the other side and it's negative, then this is not pair. It's not possible. You cannot solve. Why? Because the absolute value of any number should always be positive before we start solving. So if you look back, here it was a positive 6 and plus to a negative 6 also. But initially, it should always be a positive number. Why? Because absolute value of any number should be equal to positive answer. So here, again, it was to a positive 2, so we were able to solve. And here, once we got rid of that negative 6, it was originally to a negative 48, but once we divided by a negative 6, it changed our answer to an 8. And then we have the absolute value set equal to 8. Well, it was a positive 8, and then we could split it into a negative 8. So you always want to start off with a positive in order to start solving. If you get to a place where you still have the absolute value signs and it's set equal to a negative and nothing in front or behind it, then it's not possible. If you're not sure, I can help you guys in tutoring or in class. Please ask.